Okay, amazing. Welcome everybody to this masterclass all about how to calm and regulate your nervous system. I'm really grateful that you're here and you're taking time out of your evening to just join in this conversation. Um, and we're just going to jump right into it. So if you're here, you might be a little bit too used to at this point feeling wound up, feeling high strung, like you aren't fully relaxed into your body and just enjoying your life right now at the level that you'd like to be. And so, if you can kind of relate to that, I want to let you know that I've been there. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story in just a second. But oftentimes, with that comes feeling all sorts of different types of symptoms, right? So, you might be feeling tired, you might be feeling wired at the same time, anxious, moody, a big symptom that can come up when you've been like chronically wound up is that you just have like zero tolerance or feel like you have no patience for little things that you used to have patience for, which can make you feel really fed up and frustrated and hormonal and everything and then some. And of course, there might be other physical stuff on top of that too. So it could be stuff like digestive issues, joint pain, and really truly anything else, because the way that stress circulates throughout the body, it's so different for everybody. And there's not really an area of the body that it doesn't touch. And so I've also had a lot of experience with this side of things too. And it's just, I want you to know that it's so easy to get overwhelmed and it's so easy to get confused when there's so much conflicting information, especially online these days that we have access to. So my goal for tonight for you is to just like really give you some simple tools that make it you just kind of feel like you have confidence and some clarity into how to move forward doing little things in your day to day to really support your nervous system on a total body level. So does that sound okay to you?
Yep.
Perfect. Just gonna make sure I can see the chat here. One sec. Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about the nervous system, like I said, about little things that you can do from a really holistic perspective. So of course, as a nutritionist, I love to chat about food, about supplements, but also the nourishment that we give our body and our mind and our soul. So like the things that we feed ourselves, in the way that we talk to ourselves and the thoughts that we think, it all connects. And you're really going to understand this connection on a deeper level as we go through the class today. But I guess before we begin, I should just take a quick moment to introduce myself. I know there's some new faces here tonight. So I just want to welcome you again. I'm Danielle Zies. I'm a certified and registered holistic nutritionist. And for nearly a decade now, I've been really focusing my nutrition practice on nourishing up really depleted bodies. So I've worked with people who are so severely burnt out that they've had to quit their jobs, that they're nearly bedridden. And then on the other side of the spectrum, other people who are just feeling like they're not thriving in their life because stress is taking a toll in some shape or form and they're just not feeling like their best selves. So two ends of the spectrum. And when it comes to burnout, what I really mean by that, if anyone's wondering, sometimes it's also called adrenal fatigue, or there's a lot of different names for it. And there's a lot of different stages that you can go through, so different levels of burnout. But essentially, just to kind of keep things simple tonight and keep things like in a nutshell, it's truly when you're just feeling like stress and fatigue is keeping you from feeling like your best self. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining.
Hi.
So we're just jumping in. I was just doing a little introduction. But I wanted to just share a little bit about my story too. So we were talking about how the thoughts and the mindsets our mindsets, food, nutrition, it's all connected and it all really plays a role in our health, which I think you guys all really know. So I just explained what I mean when I say burnout. And again, in a nutshell, it's just you don't feel like you're thriving in life because stress is getting in your way. And when I say stress, I'm not just meaning like stress, oh, I have to pay these bills tomorrow. It could be digestive stress. It could be environmental stress. There's so many different forms of stress. And so if there's just something keeping you from feeling your best, we'll call that stress and we can focus on that. So let's just jump right into it, and we'll start with the food side of things. And what I've found is for so many people, especially those who have been struggling with burnout, um, food can become one of those things, or struggling with burnout, but really any health issues. Food can become one of those things that can almost become another layer of stress in our life, because there's just so much information out there on the internet and Instagram these days, that so much of it conflicts, and it can become really hard to know, well, what's good for my body, right? And I'm curious, and if you guys want to even participate, like, let me know in the chat, like, if you can relate to this, let me know. I know, even as myself, as a nutritionist, the information overload and how much conflicting stuff out there is even overwhelming to me. And I would consider myself an expert. So um, yeah, it can be totally overwhelming. And a lot of the clients that I work with come to me with all this food anxiety because they're just not sure how to move forward with picking meals and feeling clear and confident in their nutrition. And so what I really want to stress to you guys tonight, Joe says everyone on the web is an expert. I know, and that's one thing you actually have to be so careful with, because, and this is a perfect kind of like perfect segue into my very first point, is it's just not the same for everyone. So what worked for Susan on Reddit, or what worked for Sally in the Facebook group, is not necessarily going to work for you. You guys are so have total different biochemistry and totally different situations. And so what works for somebody doesn't always work for another person. And what makes it even more complicated is that, like, it changes as we go through different like seasons of life too. So it's not the same for everyone. And a good example is like fasting. So this question always comes up, especially with the burnout community. Oh, like, should I do fasting? Is it going to be good to like cleanse my body and do a detox? Is it like good for me? But what I've found, especially working with people who are really depleted and really, really high strung, and when I say high strung, I'm thinking of like the people who can't relax, like our nervous systems are really wound up. Fasting's not always like the best thing for them. And it's almost just kind of thinking, if you find yourself in this state, that you're depleted right now. So it's really about nourishing yourself back up. And when you're fasting, you're not necessarily doing that. And some people notice, especially if they are struggling with their hormones, that they feel a lot worse when they do this. So I mean, some other people might feel okay depending on their hormonal situation, but what it really comes down to is like tapping into your own knowing and figuring out what works for you. So I'm curious, like, if anybody has questions around fasting, usually a bunch come up, like, feel free to ask. That was just kind of one example, but there's so many different examples that fall along this line. So I'm just gonna have a quick sip and we'll continue.
Hi, Danielle.
Mhm.
Do you know what I find confusing? Like, as far as fasting, what you say is true. Like, you hear so many conflicting things, but even today, like, the information out there, like everybody's been saying coconut water is hydrating.
Yeah.
So I was watching today on YouTube on superfoods, and they did an experiment, a scientific experiment, and water actually was the same, if not better, than coconut water. And so, it's hard because you hear it so often. Oh, coconut water is really hydrating. Coconut water, you hear it all the time. And then they do this experiment. And the trouble is you get to that point where you don't know who to believe or even what to do, because you have so much, as you say.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's exactly really the point that I want to make for everyone, is that there's always a time and place, and there's always going to be a thing. So is there a time and place for coconut water? Like, I think so. And I will add, like, not all coconut water is created equal. And so some of them have added sugars and whatnot. And generally, like, especially for people who are burnt out, those extra minerals in coconut water can be so, so helpful. But then for other people, the sugar content, like, that might put them over the edge. So you can see how it's so bio-individual. So for some people, it might be great. And for other people, they might just not feel great after because of the sugar. So again, it's just kind of like tapping into what's working for you and how do you feel when you have it. And it could be one of those things that's like, with most superfoods that you enjoy them like occasionally, but it doesn't have to be like something you obsess over either.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm glad
Thanks.
you brought up that point. And so when it comes to food, just keeping this in mind, like where can you start and what can you take away from, what can you start doing like tomorrow, tonight even, depending on your time zone. It's really just about finding balance with whole foods, like eating a rainbow. When you put your plate together, thinking at each meal and at each snack, do I have some carbs? Do I have some healthy fats? Do I have some protein? And then listening to your body while you eat. So it's not really about a temporary fad diet, something that you do for a couple weeks and you fall off the wagon for a couple weeks and then you get back on, because I'm sure a lot of you have probably realized in the past, like you can just keep doing that over and over again and you never truly feel satisfied. And then you always kind of are taking this feeling, and when you're already stressed and wound up, you're bringing a feeling of like feeling like you didn't achieve what you wanted to, and you're bringing that guilt into it, which is a whole other layer of stress, which just kind of contributes to not feeling like you're thriving in your life. So one area where we might find we're eating and really reacting to foods. So one area that I wanted to bring up is when we're tapping into that knowing with like what foods work for us and what foods don't work for us, is that we might find that we're eating foods that we think are really healthy, but finding that we're reacting to those foods in a way that doesn't feel good. And so this is actually really common with the types of people I tend to work out who have a lot of fatigue or a lot of hormonal imbalances, because there's such a close gut connection, which we're going to talk about next. But when you start reacting to more and more foods, even like the healthy foods, this is a sign that there's something just off digestively. We need to maybe like spruce up your digestive power and really support that, because that in itself can create this whole inflammatory response almost every time you eat. So this again is kind of tapping into, how are these foods making me feel? And is this working for me right now? And like I said, maybe we're moving through a different season, or you're in a season right now where digestion might be compromised and your diet might feel more limited because you're just reacting to so many foods. So if anybody can relate to that, I'm just checking. I know some people who signed up for this class can totally relate to this. This is where the gut connection comes in. So when we talk about the nervous system, like it's just so intricately connected to our gut, and the science that's coming out these days is just so fascinating and really shakes things up with what we used to think about how the brain works. And even the gut is called our second brain. So it's intricately connected and basically essentially a part of our nervous system. And so researchers are finding evidence now that irritation in the gastrointestinal system, it disrupts the signals to the central nervous system, and this can trigger mood changes. And so science used to tell us that gut issues and things like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, were a symptom that just happens to go along with having anxiety or having depression. But now things are starting to show that it could be the opposite, because what we know now is that 10% of the nerve fibers along our vagus nerve, which is this really long nerve that goes basically from the stem of our brain all the way down to like our tailbone and kind of touches each and every endocrine system and organ. And so 90% of those fibers are actually channeling back upwards from our gut, communicating to our brain with information with what's going on in our gut. So essentially what that can kind of tell us is that maybe what we thought about anxiety and depression is actually not stemming from imbalances in the brain, but maybe more imbalances in the gut, and kind of relating to imbalances in both. So I know that that can kind of seem complicated to wrap your head around, but how I really love to simplify that, because science doesn't truly understand how the communication pathways work. We know that our gut flora, so those little bugs in our belly, play a really big role. But the way that I like to think about it is just the healthier your gut, then the better, like the healthier your gut and the healthier your body, then obviously the better communication with less disruptions you're going to have along that pathway. And so what's interesting about the vagus nerve that I was talking about is that is directly related to and part of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is this part of your nervous system that is probably activated less if you're living in a state of chronic stress. And so when we can tap into just activating that vagus nerve, and it can be simple things like breathing, laughing, doing things that are fun, moving your body, like simple things like this in our day to day, it brings us back into that parasympathetic state, and our gut and brain can communicate a little bit better. And all the better if we have a healthy gut on top of that. Just catching up on the chats here. Are probiotics necessary? That is a good question. So I want to say yes, but also no. So it just depends, right? So depending on what's going on with your gut, like I think everybody can benefit from probiotics, but depending on what's going on with your gut, because sometimes people who have like more inflammation or something more serious going on with their gut, there's a bit of a healing protocol that we follow. And just going straight to probiotics can actually make people feel a lot worse at the beginning. So I always recommend, and we're going to talk about supplements in just a minute, but I always kind of recommend getting professional support just when it comes to, especially if you're having gut health issues. If not, it's probably safe to throw in a probiotic. But if you are struggling digestively, just kind of making sure everything's in good enough shape, we'll say, so that when you add in the probiotics, you don't feel worse. But definitely getting them in from food where we can is really important. So where do we start, right? Like I feel this is a big topic. And when it comes to like whole gut healing, this is definitely like a masterclass or several in itself. But the best advice I can give you, something that you can start right away, tonight, tomorrow, is just slowing down and chew your food. Just chew it really, really well. It's something we kind of don't think about, but a lot of the times we're just eating on the go, or eating while scrolling on our phones or on our computers. And we've just kind of gotten away from enjoying our food. And it affects the way that we actually chew, which then affects the way that we digest our food. And it just adds a whole lot more stress to the whole digestive system. So it's a really simple, and everybody always says, this is so simple, like I want something juicier. But trust me, this is so juicy. If you just start to do it, it can make a really, really big difference. So I'm challenging all of you starting tomorrow to just chew, chew, chew. So who needs digestive enzymes is a question I just got. A lot of people could benefit from digestive enzymes. They're one of those things that can just support you with each and every meal. So some people can take them with every meal if they're really struggling. Some people can take them with certain meals if they know they're having something that they tend to react to. Like it's kind of common, you might have a friend, or it might be you, who like takes like a Lactaid before they have like ice cream or something. You can kind of use it depending on what you need it for. So then I wanted to touch on movement for a bit, because this is something that I see it can keep people stuck as well. And of course we know like moving is so good for our brain, for our body, for so many different reasons. But it can be one of those things, because depending on how we're moving, we want to remember that we're creating more stress in our body. So we want to make sure that we can recover from it. So this was actually such a big thing for me. So when I was in my mid-20s, I essentially just crashed out my sex and stress hormones. And I thought I was doing all these healthy things at the time, but I was a very go person, and I would go for these big long runs. And I was eating a certain diet at the time that probably wasn't as balanced as it could be. And I didn't sleep well. And so my body just didn't have the fuel or the like good sleeps that it needed to recover. And over time, this really kicked my butt, kicked my butt. And I learned a lot of lessons the hard way. So when it comes to moving, I find that people are either like, there's a sweet spot. And again, it's tapping into like what's going to work for you with this stage and this season of your life that you're in. So it's really easy sometimes if you're really in that wound up state, and it's really easy to either push too hard and do like all these high intensity interval workouts, go for long runs, all of this big cardio that really pushes you. But you always want to make sure that you're recovering adequately. And so what I find is sometimes people just aren't, and they're kind of doing what I was doing, and then you're essentially burning the candle at both ends. And then on the other hand, some people are feeling really tired and then they're not doing anything, which is also not good in itself. So there's always, no matter what stage of fatigue you have and no matter where you're at, there's always something that you can do that's going to be supportive. It's just tapping into that inner knowing and figuring out, like, what does my body need? What does it need this week? How do I feel today? And like, what could I do for it to just get the blood flowing, stretch things out? There's so many different things. Some of my favorites, if you're really tired and you have a lot of fatigue and like even walking wipes you out, you can just do like nice gentle stretching, foam rolling, use those trigger point balls, but you want to make sure that you're doing something to keep your muscles moving and blood flowing. Well, your blood's going to flow, but boost it a bit. How do you get motivated when you're in the fatigue stage? That's another good question. I think it's about, I've had this conversation a lot with clients. It's really about, if you're not feeling motivated, being really gracious with yourself and just maybe picking one thing for that day that you want to do. And one thing that I find with a lot of people who do get caught in fatigue is that we might be very type A, or we might be doers. So we might have this long list of things on our list that we feel like we have to check off, and that can feel really, really overwhelming. So my advice around this is just be really gracious with yourself and really like tone down that list as much as you possibly can, so that it's something that feels really doable for you. And then you can kind of celebrate that win when you check it off and build on it if you have the energy from there. So I wanted to touch on, this was another area where I learned some hard lessons. And this is how the herbs and supplements fit in. So while you're dialing in your nutrition, while you're dialing things in so that you have just this beautiful optimized gut health, people tend to look to find like what's going to be the herb or what's going to be the supplement protocol to like do all this magic for me. And so herbs and supplements, of course, they can be so supportive, especially when you have a lot of fatigue, especially if your body is very depleted. But I just want to emphasize that it's really important to just not go out and buy random things. I always recommend having confidence and like, if you can, working with a professional, and like this is where I could support you if you need some support, having somebody who kind of knows what they're doing to help you pick what's going to be the most supportive for you right now. So even like, and this is, again, I'll share a little bit with my story, especially because hormones can be such a complicated thing. So I knew a lot about hormones at the time, and I was having these symptoms when my hormones were crashed out, which I didn't know at the time, that alluded to me having like high androgen hormones and high estrogen. And I was even working with a naturopathic doctor at the time. So we were just going based off my symptoms. And I was spending good money on supplements like DIM and I3C and, all these different herbs to help me lower these hormones that seemed like they were high. And then I decided to do hormone testing. And when I got my results back, I was shocked to see that everything was so low. So even though I was having these symptoms where things appeared that certain hormones would be high, it was actually like how high they were relative to other hormones, but everything was low across the board. So I realized my approach was so backwards. Like, here I was spending money to lower hormones that were already low, when I should have just been focusing on the bigger picture of just nourishing everything back up. So you can imagine that my strategy totally changed once I got those test results. And that's truly when I started noticing like more profound results with my health. So I just want to emphasize, because I think that you can be doing the right things and working with people who do know their stuff, but like if sometimes when you don't have clarity around the whole hormonal picture, it's better to just be safe than to be sorry. And so when it comes to being safe, just like starting with the foundations, right? So if you're doing something like a multivitamin, I mean, that's one thing. But if you're doing a herbal, like a stimulating herbal supplement for energy, that's kind of another. So I know that's kind of a lot to digest, but it really comes about thinking about your foundations. And I challenge you to like look at your life and look at your diet and kind of look at how you're feeling right now and think like, what do I really need if I were going to pick a herb and supplement? And honestly, like they're just a supplement, right? Like a herb and supplement, herbs and vitamins, I should say, are not going to be the be all end all to your recovery. Like I said, they're just a support. So I just recommend almost leaving that protocol to a professional. But if you're thinking about it, I know a lot of you probably are. It's like pick the one thing that you think is going to make the biggest impact right now from a foundational perspective. So it could be like an essential vitamin, like vitamin D or vitamin C or multivitamin, like I said. For some people, maybe just a probiotic. But yeah, it's hard to choose. And so that's where having a clear plan that you feel really confident in from a professional can really make a big impact and help prevent setbacks, which I think is really huge. I think it's best to test than guess before you go out and spend tons of money on supplements. Yeah, that you'll save money, time, and setbacks, because like honestly, that was the lesson that I learned that hard way. And I do think it's better to test in some scenarios. Sometimes I will say, because I've done a lot of testing and I do a lot of testing with clients, like sometimes we get into things and we start doing that initial assessment and we think like maybe we don't need to test because we are going to start somewhere a little bit more safe and a little bit more gentle. But then if they're not really getting results, we do the testing, because the testing can be a bit expensive. We do the testing and then we just dial things in from there on out. And it often, like it always brings a lot of clarity, but it's not always necessary to start there. But it's so nice to know that all these tests are available if we want to. Good questions tonight, guys. So I wanted to share just like another simple tool that can create an instant shift. And I think that when it comes to having tools, you can probably all think of different things that you can call on when you feel stressed or when you feel upset. Like we all kind of have these things at the back of our mind. But the biggest challenge is that we just don't use them, because like we get caught up in our emotions in the moments and like all rationality can go out the window. And so having awareness is so important when it comes to your state. And so when you are able to kind of step into that, when you realize that you're going down a path or you're stuck in a state that doesn't feel good, that's when you can bust out these tools. And I mean, there's so many different ones. One of my favorite ones, and one that I wanted to share with you guys today, is just box breathing. Some of you may have heard of it. Navy SEALs use box breathing to help calm their nervous system down in really tense situations. And it's just nice and easy to remember, because you can kind of think of a little box and just think like 4, 4, 4, 4. Hold your breath for 4, inhale for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And there's really great apps you can get if you want support, just like that helps hold you accountable to doing a bit of breath work every day. But that's one simple tool that you can call on when you're feeling like a lot of big emotions and you're feeling riled up. It will create an instant shift. Like if you do that for 5 minutes, you're gonna feel different. But like I said, the hardest part is having that like moment of clarity where you realize you're caught up in it. Okay, so I just got a question. What's the difference between an ND, an RD, and a holistic nutritionist? So an ND is naturopathic doctor. RD is registered dietitian. So you'll find a lot of registered dietitians working like in the hospital setting, but I mean, they're everywhere as well. And holistic nutritionist that's what I am. Holistic nutritionists really focus on the total body. So it's not just like basic protocols. We really look at you and your lifestyle and just target kind of everything based on your unique biochemistry and your unique situation. I really like to tune into like your likes and dislikes. And my whole premise, like Simply Nourished as a nutritionist, is like, if it's not sustainable, it's not going to stick. So what it's truly about, and like I said before, it's not just another fad diet that you do for a couple weeks. It's about creating a sustainable lifestyle that you know is going to support you now, help you hit your goals now, but also help you hit and maintain more goals and be preventative in the future as well. I hope that clarifies. So yeah, I wanted to also talk about navigating around the big blocks that I see that really keep people stuck and not progressing. And I think a good example of this is I've had some clients that I've worked with, and one of them said something interesting to me is that like every year at the end of the year, she finds herself writing the same resolution year after year. And she was like, I don't want to give up on my goal because it's something that I've always wanted. But at this point in my life, because I've written it like 10 years in a row, I don't really know if it's attainable for me. So it's almost like when you feel like you're so used to not achieving it that it's not that you accept it, but you almost feel like there's a disconnect with your mindset and your actions, right? Because for so long you haven't done it. And so I think that can really keep people stuck. If you've really struggled for a long time, if you haven't seen those results and you haven't had that breakthrough moment. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that can keep people stuck and not progressing. But I think the biggest thing, and especially for her, because when we started working together and she started getting big results, it just became so obvious that just having a clear strategy that's made for you can truly be the thing that like sets you free from that goal on your resolution list year after year after year, or whatever it is, right? So it's not having that clear strategy or not having confidence in your strategy. It's trying to do it all. And trying to do it all is like when you go all in, you're so excited to do all these things, and then it's just not sustainable. It was too much at once, and then you just circle right back to your old ways. And I find with that, it's like you're coming back to that push state that I was talking about. So that was the state that I was in with, my big to-do list. I got to run my 10K like this many times a week. I got to do this, this, and this for work. Do, and not enough like coming back into a flow state where you're more in allowance of just going with the flow and having grace for yourself and not being so rigid. Because I find when you're trying to do it all and then you're staying in that push state, it can really, really keep you stuck. And then when you are trying to rest, it almost feels impossible to rest because you have that guilt again that you're not doing. I'm curious if any of you can relate to that. So yeah, some other things that keep people stuck, I was going to say fad diets and fasting, but also just not creating something sustainable for your life. And that kind of ties in all together with all of these things. When you create something sustainable, it's something that you can feel like confident in doing day after day after day. And that's where you'll truly see results. I always say it's not like the salad that helps you lose weight, right? Like you could eat a salad for every meal today, but it's not really going to make a difference tomorrow. But maybe it's having like one salad every day on top of some other different meals, like doing that one thing every day in place of something else for a longer period of time that allows you to see those big results. I'm just checking on the questions here. And I know we just had another person join. Hi, Bina. If you have any questions, we're almost about to wrap up. We kind of just went through a lot, but I will be sending out a replay. So if you guys want to watch again or catch up on any of this, you can definitely watch the replay, but I'm just catching up on some of the questions here. When you blow one meal, you want to give up for the whole week. And that's so easy to do. And again, Luann, that kind of comes back to being graceful with yourself. And what I love is to teach people like to get to a point where you can have that one meal and feel like you blew it, but at the same time, you know that you're nourishing yourself in a way that's so supportive for your body the rest of the time that you don't even have to think twice about those. Like no guilt allowed. You're allowed to like live your life, have your treats, but you know that you've built something really sustainable that feels amazing for your day to day for the most part. I recently reintroduced dairy into my diet to make hitting protein goals easier via lactose-free organic Greek yogurt and lactose-free cottage cheese. Despite the lactose-free, my body is not liking it, even the pasture-raised eggs. Yeah, Nick, that can be tough. I know dairy is such like a digestible form of protein for so many. But again, it's one of those foods that is one of the top 5 allergens. So it's such a common food that people have problems with. And this was something that I can actually relate to too. And it comes back to your gut health a little bit. I don't know if you've struggled with this for a really long time, but another story I like to share is I used to be so like dairy just was not good for me to the point where, you know, on Starbucks where you can get like a free drink for your birthday. I went to Starbucks one time, got like a fancy free drink that I would normally never order, but I forgot to get like the dairy-free version back in the day. And then we like drove away. So it wasn't easy to get back. And I ended up just not drinking it because like one sip would make my body so itchy. But now after like diving into all my gut issues and addressing that stuff head on, now I can drink those lattes and I can eat the pizza and do those things that I thought that I would never be able to do in my life because I fixed those underlying gut issues, if that makes sense. So for some people who struggle with a lot of sensitivities right now, I like to give you the hope that it doesn't have to be a forever thing. Like you do that work and you can actually free yourself to more food freedom because you've improved that digestive state. I mean, for some people, dairy might not really ever work. And it is one of those common allergens. So it just truly depends on you. But there's hope. There's hope there if you have some digestive issues going on. And maybe for now, it's kind of coming back to exploring something that feels a little bit better for you. And I know it can be hard when that dairy is so easy, but one of my tricks even is just like getting a good protein powder. Or what you could try is maybe not doing cow's dairy. Maybe that would be a good place to start and try doing something like goats or sheep's dairy to start, because people tend to do a little bit better with that. And then I'm getting a question, what about wheat and grains? And again, it's kind of coming back, like wheat and grains can be such a supportive food for people who are burnt out. It's a great form of energy. But for some people with digestive issues, it might not be something that's working for you. So I'm not going to say take them out. Not going to say leave them in. Really, it really truly comes down to you being intuitive when you have your next meal and seeing how you feel after, because there's a time and a place for all of this stuff, right? Like sometimes removing the wheat and the grains can be profound for people, and some people need them to thrive. So it's really, really hard to say without like really understanding your case. But like I said, there's not really any hard rules. It's kind of the ideal thing is just like figuring out what's the sweet spot for you right now if you're having a lot of issues. And that's maybe a great segue for me to invite any of you guys who are feeling like you need more clarity for yourself and you just need support in getting that confidence in your plan and kind of stepping into something that's more sustainable for your life. So you can, 2022 comes around, we're less than 6 months out, like 2022 comes around and you're writing different goals for the first time because you've hit them and moved beyond. Like I'd love to support you to getting to that point. And so I'm going to share a link for anybody interested who would like to book a call to just chat more. Just going to share it there in the chat. Really good questions, everybody. just catching up here. Is anybody else wondering about anything else? So I know a lot of you, when you probably signed up for this masterclass, you were probably feeling unclear on how to tackle things head on with a strategy that felt sustainable and a strategy that you feel really good about. And I know this is such a big topic, and I've truly just scratched the surface today, giving you a couple quick tips of things that you can start thinking about when you're making your food, when you're eating your food, little tips when you're feeling really overwhelmed. But I want to let you know that if you do feel like you need more, that I'd love to support you. Like I said, there's 6 months left, less than 6 months left of the year now. I guess we're getting closer to 5, which is crazy, but that's a lot of time for you to do a lot of work and just wrap up 2021 at a whole new state from where you started, once and for all. And so I would love to support you with that. The calls are normally 30 to 35 minutes for anyone interested. Joe's asking, I heard kombucha has alcohol. It has a little bit, but it's just because it's naturally fermented. So it's not a lot, Joe, but it does have a little bit. Yeah, so I think I covered off everything that I wanted to share tonight, but I'd love to open up the floor for questions if anybody has anything lingering on their mind. You guys already asked some really good ones.
Danielle, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm having real issues with staying hydrated lately. And I know you were talking about coconut water, and I know that's high in electrolytes, and I think that's why people drink it.
Yeah.
But I'm really thirsty all the time.
Yeah.
And what's causing that? Is that stress? Is that my adrenals, or, you know?
Yeah, typically with thirst like that, Tom, there's two things that come to my mind. One is blood sugar.
Yeah.
Number two is when there's adrenal stuff going on. And I mean, it could be a little bit of both. There is some hormones, aldosterone is one of them, but like when your hormones can get kind of thrown out of whack, which is so easy to happen when you're under stress, it really changes the way that your body uses minerals and also dumps minerals. So one common symptom that people get a lot of is that they have frequent urination, so that they're always going to the bathroom, dumping a lot of minerals, but then in the state of stress where you're using up so many at the same time. And sometimes just drinking like tap water or even like filtered water where all the minerals have been stripped isn't really going to be hydrating enough. So Tom, I know you have my cookbook. There's the adrenal cocktail in there is a really helpful, like a really helpful drink that you could make. And essentially what that is for everybody is basically you boost your water with sodium and potassium. So one trick is you can use a really good coconut water, which is going to be a good source of potassium, then just a little pinch of sea salt. And you're going to get those minerals, and you might feel a little bit of a difference when you drink your water in terms of just like how you absorb it.
Yeah.
Hold on to it. So I hope that helps, Tom.
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good question, especially with these hot days. You want to watch that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I want to leave. I have a bit more time, so if anybody has more questions, feel free.
Just to add, Danielle, I do drink a lot of water too. So, you know, but I'm feeling like my whole body's just dry. You know, my skin is dry. Like I'm finding, you know, like my skin is flaky and dry. That sort of thing. You know.
Yeah, it's thinking like hydrating from the inside out and the outside in.
Yeah,
right? So yeah, make sure you're eating those healthy fats and stuff too, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Danielle.
You're welcome.
You ready to go home?
Does anybody else have any questions? If not, or if anything pops up to you after, I mean, of course, feel free. Oh, I've got a question here. I was going to say, feel free to email me too. If it's something that you're not feeling like asking on the call, you could always send me an email or schedule that call. But Nick
Okay.
is asking, how about sleep essentials, magnesium and 5-HTP I'm currently using, still not getting a full 8. Nick, that can be tricky. Again, with the supplements like magnesium, 5-HTP, I really like. Good for some, not good for everybody, right? Depending, especially 5-HTP can interact with medications. So it's one of those things, like some people do really great with it. And there's a lot of other things that you could try, and a lot of other things that, I mean, that you could look at, or we could look at together if you wanted to see like what's going on with your sleep. Sleep is one of those things that I find when people are stressed, it gets highly impacted. And then it's one of those things when you're not sleeping well, it just makes everything else so much harder. So it just perpetuates the stress. So it can be one of those things that really keep people stuck, especially if they're not getting a lot of hours. But I would recommend, Nick, maybe starting to like look at the lifestyle and the sleep hygiene and like what you're doing before bed first. Like the supplements will be supportive, but like the lifestyle leading up to your sleeps and the state that you're in when you get into bed too, that's all really important. So there's so many different areas that you could look at to help you optimize that even more.
Cool. Sleep I don't have an issue with.
That's good. Some
Yeah.
people tend to sleep well, and for other people, it gets really affected. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, like I said, if any other questions pop up, feel free to email me. If you feel called and you want to chat a little bit more, book a call. The link is there in the chat, and I'll also link it again when I send the replay. I would love to like support you in getting to the bottom of things, but I just want to say I'm so grateful for all of you spending your Thursday night with me or your Thursday evening, and so grateful for you to like have been here live with me. This is my first live masterclass that I've done like this. So thank you for being a part of it, and looking forward to chatting with you guys more soon, whether on a call or like Instagram or email.
Thanks a lot, Danielle.
Thank you guys. Have a
Thank
nice
you,
night.
everyone. Good night.